3rd, 1982. I am here with Polly Bryson, an Auburndale resident for most of her entire life, and we're going to interview just what community life was like back in the 1940s and throughout up to the present 1983. Mrs. Bryson, when you were growing up, were there any common areas where children congregated and met that you...
Yes, most of the recreational activities centered around the Charles River. Ware's Cove, where we went swimming, and there were tennis courts there, and swings and slides, and there was a bathhouse. Also, the river had canoe rides and the paddle boats, and that's the places that kids went mostly.
I see.
The paddle boats with their parents and so forth, but Ware's Cove was where we spent many a
Very
summer
interesting.
afternoon.
Wow. Okay. Did you belong to any organizations throughout your youth and your your teenagehood?
Yes, most of them were centered around the church activities, such as the CYO and the church choir and their activities, and dancing classes.
I see.
And that type of club. It was centered mostly in Auburndale.
Okay. And were all the youngsters involved in this? Were there always a select group among your peers?
Actually, the church group, it was mostly the people that went to the church. The dancing classes, yes, that was varied, and that gave you more of a insight into the other people.
Okay. Could you describe a weekend day for an Auburndale youth, or even for yourself, from the time you woke up until the time you went to bed?
Yes, if I could describe possibly a Sunday. And it started with Mass in the morning. We lived diagonally across Commonwealth Avenue from our church, and it was singing in the choir. And then I had older sisters, and one would normally take me to where there was a soda shop.
Oh, I see.
And we would go there for me for the Coke afterward, and she for a cup of coffee. And then Sunday dinner, and in the afternoon it would be a walk to the Charles River and the paddle boats. This was when I was 13 or 14 years old, which would be in the 1940s, late 1940s. And then home for a light supper, a lot of walking. The Norumbega Tower was not too far from where the paddle boats were.
I see.
And that was built as a type of memorial to the Norsemen that came over on the Charles.
Oh, wow.
And it was on the partly in Weston. But that was a nice walk, maybe like an hour's walk between there and back. And then in the evening, many times, we would walk to the West Newton movie house.
Oh, really? Wow.
And so when I think back, it was a lot of walking, but a lot of it centered around the Charles River and the recreational activities there.
Was Sunday considered a very popular day where everybody came out and out of the woodworks, or was it?
No, I think growing up in Auburndale at that time, it was mostly you were with family or close friends, and it was a matter of you walked a lot, but it was centered around the recreational activities of the when Norumbega Park was there. That was part of my earlier growing up, and you went there many times. And on a Sunday night or a Saturday night, there were the outdoor movies there. There were free movies.
Oh, wow.
At Norumbega Park. And it had the bear cages and the swings there along the wooden swings, and spent many a Saturday or a Sunday there.
You say that when Norumbega Park was there, what has happened since you grew up? Has it disappeared, or? Yes,
Norumbega Park was sold, and
okay, it's on there.
Okay, the park was sold in 1959 or thereabout, and the Marriott Hotel that now exists was built in the mid-1960s. That did change the area quite a bit. And across the street, Norumbega owned land previously, was proposed a building, an office building complex.
I see.
but apartments are built there now. Part of that land also was retained by the city of Newton
I see.
next to the Marriott for recreational purposes. So it's parkland.
Oh, that's interesting. And were any of your children fortunate enough to play in the park at all?
Yes, my older daughter, who is 30 now, was born in 1952, and we went there quite a bit for the outdoor movies that they still had at that time.
I see.
And during the time I was growing up also, I had forgotten to mention the totem pole existed. And as a teenager, that was wonderful. They had the old bands and didn't serve any alcoholic beverages and all, so parents weren't afraid for their teenagers to go there. And it was absolutely a fantastic place, one of the old ballrooms. It was, and that was destroyed by fire.
Oh, and they never rebuilt it?
No, no.
I see.
Just a wonderful place to go.
And you don't have that anymore at all?
No, that's right.
Too bad. Okay, what was the feeling among the community? Did everybody know each other? Was it a community that was so large or just so small?
You knew the people who went to your church and the people who lived in your part of Auburndale. Auburndale actually has, when I think about it, 3 different sections. One section was across the railroad tracks, divided it. And it wasn't that one was economically higher than the other. It was just that you weren't apt to know those people unless they went to your church. And there was another area that was more up by the river, what they call the peninsula, which is Islington Road, Kingswood, and up there. And those people more kept to themselves, and it was more the private schools and so forth.
I see. You mentioned the church once again. That seems to be a very popular or some sort of meeting place, obviously on Sundays.
Yes, it was, and I've kept that up even to today. I'm a Eucharistic minister there, and I've been on the parish council and involved with many things, president of the Women's Guild, and involved with many things there. So it still is a place that you go to.
Wow, so it's still popular even today.
Right, exactly.
What about the population when you were growing up? Was it heavily populated or sparsely populated?
At that time, it was mostly families and more single homes than even double homes. In the last 10 years or so, there have been several apartment complexes on Lexington Street on Commonwealth Avenue.
I see.
And more dual homes. Also, there's a housing for the elderly on Ash Street, and that has provided housing for many of our elderly people. So I think, actually, if there is any increase, and I think it's very little increase, say within the last 10 years or so, it's due to people renting or the elderly moving into the apartments.
You say the elderly. Are you referring to then older people have moved into Auburndale in the last 20 years with obviously the population has increased?
It has increased, and when I say elderly, I mean the people in the elderly housing project, so to speak, the Newton housing. And that's right across the street from the church. Exists on the old Burr School area, Burr Elementary School, where I went to school as a child, and where my older daughter went to school.
Wow, so there's a little history there.
That's right.
That's really nice. Were there, during the main roads, or was there a main road in Auburndale that just cut right through the town?
Actually, it was Commonwealth Avenue, and I lived on the carriage lane of Commonwealth Avenue. And I lived there since I was 4 in 1938.
Oh, wow.
And there were both double houses and single houses there. It's interesting to note that a person I graduated with mentioned to me just a few years ago that, don't you realize that you lived in the more affluent part of Commonwealth Avenue? And I had never realized it. Lexington Street, I guess, in several people's minds, Lexington Street going east there were 2 family houses in that section, and they didn't feel as though they were as well off, which was something I never realized.
Wow, that's interesting.
So people's concepts are certainly different than yours.
I guess so. What about the main stores or any favorite soda pop shops where kids or where you would spend an afternoon or?
Actually, not a shop right here in Auburndale per se, although what is still Key's Drugstore on the corner of Auburn and Melrose Street here, across from the library, did have a soda shop or a soda counter at that time. But it was the Riverside Recreation area that is off Charles Street, and that had a very, very large swimming pool with lockers, and it had a jukebox there, and that's where you would spend many a summer afternoon, and it was wonderful.
Wow.
And it connected to the river, and recreational, there were games played there, softball and so forth.
Coming up to more modern times in the 80s, are there any of those type places still in existence, such as recreational?
Actually, Ware's Cove is still there, even though the river got so polluted you haven't been able to swim in it for several years. But certainly there are the tennis courts there that are more modern than we had. There is a, it's a type of area where people do go still for picnics. There are picnic tables and for softball games, and the recreation people use it quite a bit for structured use.
Okay. What about your parents? Did they live in Auburndale? And if they did or if they did not, what motivated them to reside in Auburndale?
Okay, my parents immigrated from Ireland in the teens, 1915, 1916. And when I was born, we lived in Weston, and we moved here when I was 4 years old. My dad worked in Weston, so actually it was a geographical advantage, close to work. And they liked the community because it was family-oriented, and it was people caring about their properties.
I see. That's good. And do they like Auburndale better than Ireland? If they had an opportunity to stay in either Auburndale or move to Ireland?
They went back to Ireland in 1969, and they had been married 50 years. And even though they enjoyed visiting their homeland, the United States had become their country. My dad had been in the First World War, and growing up we were always told, be proud of your heritage, but you're an American first. And they were American citizens also, and glad to be back here.
Okay. What are your present family's views of Auburndale, your husband and your children?
They have grown to love Auburndale as I have. We've been married 31 years, and except for about 6 months, my husband has lived here also. We think there's no other place like Auburndale. I love Newton. We have a place on the Cape, but we're always glad to get back to Auburndale. And we're very involved, so I think it's the people that we know and the feeling of being at home.
Okay. When you say involved, what type of activities are you presently involved in?
Well, right now I'm president of the Auburndale Community Association, which is a very demanding position because of the projects that are proposed here. As far as Riverside MBTA land there's a proposal there now for some development, large development. Commonwealth Avenue, there's an urban systems plan to redo Commonwealth Avenue with many, many changes, and big controversy there now. As far as the church is concerned, I'm past president of Our Ladies Guild, and now I'm currently treasurer of that guild. And I head up the Eucharistic ministers. I'm the contact person there, and am on the, I should say, the committee of citizens that opposed the methods of the recent revaluation. It's called Save Our Homes 2. I'm vice president of that. and involved in maybe more things than I have time
So
for at this point.
Very actively involved.
Yes,
That's
yes.
good.
Care
That's
about
really
the
good.
community. I think the people in this community, they just don't live here. They just don't come home to stay in their homes, particularly the
that's
ones that are homeowners here or that have lived here for a long time. They seem to care, and they care a great deal about what's going to happen to the community.
That's fantastic. Wow. Okay, how has the environment of Auburndale changed from the time you grew up and the time your children have grown up?
When you say environment, you mean...
Recreational activities, are there more now than there were when you were growing up?
Actually, there are, I believe, less recreational activities within an arm's length. Now I think because there is no longer swimming in the Charles River, Wears Cove, if you want to go swimming, you have to get in the car or on a bike to go to Crystal Lake, which is in Newton Center.
I see.
There certainly are more recreational activities, but you have to go further to get to them.
I see. So, putting an unfair question to you, would you rather grow up when you grew up, or would you rather grow up when your children were growing up in the 60s, as compared to the 40s?
I would say I'd rather go back to when I grew up. It was a much quieter type
Sure.
life, and you didn't have to rely on people to transport you as much, and
I
you
see.
were more on your own in that way.
Okay.
When I think back, it was playing jacks on the front porch, watching the cars go by
Right,
on a
sure.
Sunday afternoon much of the time. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. What events or changes have you witnessed in Auburndale in the time, say, maybe when you become more politically aware of the implications of particular projects, such as maybe the Marriott Hotel or the Turnpike?
The Turnpike going through in the early 1960s, and it did go right through from the Weston line, cut right through Auburndale. It went on the railroad bed, the existing railroad bed, but it took away several one-family and two-family homes, several villages over what was then the existing bridge over the railroad tracks, several buildings along Auburn Street. When I think of the old railroad depot, my sisters were older than I was, and I used to go there on my bike to meet them every night. It was like clockwork when they'd come home on the train. And many of those memories, when I think of them, it's the Turnpike. I know it's good for transportation, but
Yes.
I'd love to have seen more of the tree-lined streets
Sure.
that were here closer to the square. Also, the Marriott, I believe that has changed Auburndale quite a bit. I realize it's given people employment, and many of them are Auburndale people. But as far as tax advantage, I saw a chart not too long ago, and it has not helped the tax base that much, and the increased police and fire protection and so forth that is involved there, I really believe that has eaten into some of that tax base.
See, when you say the Turnpike and had to relocate people, did these people end up staying in Auburndale, or were they furious enough to get up and go and move to another community?
Many of them stayed within Auburndale. Many of the businesses did have to move. Some of them did relocate on this side of the railroad, or of the then Turnpike.
What about now, 1983? Are there any new ideas or complexes or issues that could change Auburndale at all?
Actually, on the outskirts of Auburndale, closer to Newton Law Falls, is the MBTA lot. And there is a proposal now in the works for a very large development there. We have been promised, the Auburndale people have been promised input into that. And I just hope that continues to materialize, but it's just at the beginning stages right now. They say it will be good revenue for the MBTA and it will help. I don't believe it if it's going to throw more traffic onto Grove Street, which is near the La Salle area and so forth, because we have traffic problems here now. Also, I had mentioned the urban systems project regarding Commonwealth Avenue. People are fearful of that, bringing more cars into the area as a thoroughfare because of if they can go faster.
Okay. If you had any physical or any sort of ability to change Auburndale, would you have changed it? Or if you could have stopped some sort of complex from being built, maybe the Marriott Hotel, who knows, what and how would you have gone about it? Or what would you have changed?
I think the Marriott Hotel, I would have loved to have seen that. Not that I don't enjoy going to the Marriott from time to time, and I've been there to many functions and to dinner and so forth. But I do believe that it has created more of a problem for the Auburndale people than any of us had bargained for. There was incentive, and there was something before the Board of Aldermen a few years back for them to increase that and to put underground parking there. We were successful in not having that done. We have good aldermen in the area, and we're very fortunate to have them.
That's good. If you had an opportunity to start all over again, would you reside in Auburndale from your youth on up to now? That's good.
Unequivocally, yes.
And do you have any plans to retire in Auburndale? Is this going to be your permanent home, or your children will be able to come back to when they're at your age?
I would hope that I would stay in Auburndale. We have a place on the Cape, and we had given some thought to moving there to retire. And right now, I would say that because of our involvement in the community and our feeling of belonging, that I definitely would want to stay in Auburndale.
So you'd give up the quiet, serene life of Cape Cod to stay in the hustle and the bustle of Auburndale and the city of Boston?
As long as I could go back to the Cape, and I think that that's where I get my relaxation, but then I always look forward to coming home and the involvement. And I think that the friends that you build up over the years are more valuable than anything. Not that more friends can't be, that you can't foster new friendships, but I think the old ones are marvelous.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.